JavaScript ES6 classes. Objects are based on classes. These are blueprints and detail a future object. When we're talking about object-oriented programming, we describe an object as having properties, these are values it has, or methods, these are functions it has as part of this object. These two, properties and methods, define the relationship between an object and other objects. As part of object-oriented programming, we are oriented to objects. We care about objects and their relationships. The relationship between objects are described as either is a, has a, or none. So if an object is based on another, the relationship is a. One object is another. It is based on the other object. So for example, I'm human and my parents are human. The relationship then is that I am a human because my parent is a human and I am based on my parent, therefore I am also a human. That is an object based on another, the relationship is a. One is another. If an object contains another object, it is a has a relationship. So for example, I have a coffee cup. I have the coffee cup, so the relationship is that has a, I have a relationship. I have a coffee cup. I am a human, my parents are human, therefore I am also human, and the relationship is a. If I have something, it is has a, which again sounds kind of silly in English, but those are the two main relationships in object-oriented programming. If one object and another object are neither is a or has a, their relationship is none. There is no relationship between those two objects. So again, metaphor family is important to understanding objects. If an object is based on another, it is a child of that other object. The original object is the parent. So we have parent objects and child objects. The child is a object of parent, which would make a little more sense when we look at an example. In JavaScript, the keyword extends makes this explicit connection. An object extends is based on another object. So the relationship between one object and an object that extends that original object is a. If one object has another object, the relationship is has a. With extends, this is explicitly is a object. That is, one is another because it is based on that. Remember, think of humans. The parent is a human. The child is a human. The relationship is a. One is another. So when an object extends another, it takes in everything the original base object is and builds on it. Again, think about this metaphor of family. You have parents and you have the genetic code, the combination genetic code of your parents. So you have the things that they are based on, and then you can build on that. So think of a ladder, if the genetics sounds confusing. Think of a ladder where you are standing on it and you are reaching upwards. You have everything the ladder is, the entire height of the ladder, plus you. You are extending from the ladder. So there is the base object, the ladder. You are standing on the ladder. You are extending the ladder. The keyword class is used to define a class in JavaScript ES6. It is followed by the name of the class, if it builds on another object, and then opening and closing curly brackets. As I've mentioned multiple times across these videos, if you see opening and closing curly brackets, that means objects are being used. In this case, we are creating the blueprint for a future object. So one more thing. All classes have a special method. This acts like a function, but in object-oriented programming terminology, it's called a method, called a constructor. So this allows for data to be passed to the class when creating an object and for creating new properties within it. Again, think back of this metaphor of a blueprint. We have a blueprint. When we're finished, we've got all of our design right, we're ready to move on, we call a constructor to come in and build the object, right? Build the house based on the blueprint. We have a blueprint, our class, we call a constructor, which is a special method, and then we're building an object based on that. Let's look at some code in Visual Studio Code. So here, up here, lines 1 through 6, I have defined a class called cat. Now notice I'm going to be using a capital letter for all of these objects. That is a good pattern to get into. When you're defining a new class or defining any class, use a capital letter. So we have a class cat, capital letter C. Inside of this, that is inside of the class, is a method, again, a special function or a special type of function that is part of an object called a constructor. It accepts name, which is the parameter it accepts, and then creates right here on line 4 an internal property to the class. Again, classes are future objects. So in this case, it's using the this keyword to refer to cat. Anything based on cat will now have a property called name, which will be whatever is passed to its constructor. So again, think back to the metaphor of blueprints and buildings. We have this blueprint, the class. When we are ready, we call the constructor, we give it maybe additional data, in this case name, and then it builds the object for us, in this case also building the property this.name, using the dot notation for objects to refer to its property. This refers to cat. The cat's name is whatever we pass into it. Now let's look at, right here, a lion. Lines 8 through 21, 8 including the comment. So a lion is based on a cat, or put another way, a lion is a kind of cat. So we defined what a cat is, and now we can define the lion based on that cat. So class lion extends cat. It has its own constructor because it needs to be built. In this case, it is now using a special type of method called super. A super calls from a child to a parent's constructor. So I'm saying, hey, I am building something based on you. Here's the data I got. I'm giving it to you. So this case, the constructor inside lion calls the constructor inside cat because a lion extends cat. It has everything it has. So we can call its constructor. So why would I want to do that? Well, notice I am not creating a property right here inside the constructor of lion. The property is created over here inside cat. So when I call super, it passes whatever I got as name directly up to cat, and then cat creates the property. Lion is based on cat, so then it gets the property because it has the same code. It's based on this. It is extending that object. This may seem a little bit weird, but it's actually incredibly useful design. That is, you can design a general object and then design a specific object based on that original. That is, we define a generic cat, and then we define a more specific lion based on that cat. The cat has everything we want to give to it, its properties and methods. Then we extend that cat, in this case a lion, as a special type of cat. In this case, a lion roars. So it has a method, again, that looks like a function, but does not use the function keyword. And again, if you put the cursor over it, it's telling you that this is a method. So because cat has the property name, which we define through this use of constructors, and a lion extends cat, a lion is based on a cat, it then also has the same property, this.name. So finally, down here, we're going to actually get this done. So these two are our blueprints, again, thinking back to that metaphor, are blueprints for future objects. We're not making the objects, we're defining how they will be structured. Defining the blueprint for the future object. When we are ready to do that, we call the constructor. The new keyword in this case, notice as I put the cursor over it, it highlights constructor, will call the constructor method of the class to build the object and then hand me back the object. Similar to, again, the metaphor, we define the blueprint, we call the constructor does its work, and it hands us back off the new object. So we pass in Leo as the name. Leo gets passed to the constructor inside lion, which calls super. Again, notice, let the Visual Studio Code help us here. If we put the cursor over it, the constructor cat, which sets up this property, which means lion now has this property. So when I call roar, which happens down here in line 26, I have access to that property because cat has access to that property, and a lion extends a cat. So finally then, through all of this, we set up this name, and then I can call roar, which will call roar as part of lion and use the property as part of cat, which is a very long way to go about saying that my name is Leo. So again, complicated way of going about this, but object-oriented programming within JavaScript ES6. So let's review what we've gone over in this video. To go back to the beginning, right? We described objects as existing in a is a, has a, or none relationship. One object is either based on another, which we know in JavaScript means the word extends. So a lion extends cat. A lion is based on a cat. That is a relationship. Or one object may be in a has a. So in this case right here, a cat has a name. This is a has a relationship. Cat has a name. A lion is a cat. So is a and has a relationships. So we know then that the class keyword in JavaScript allows us to define a class. A class can be thought of as a blueprint. It doesn't create an object. It defines a structure for a future object. When we are ready, we call its constructor. The constructor method is used when the new keyword is combined with class. So we see right here, if I put the cursor over lion, it tells us, hey, this is the constructor for lion. The lion class is right here. Lion is based on cat. So the extends keyword helps us make that explicit connection between a base class, the parent, and the child class, if metaphor of family helps. And we can use the super method to talk to its constructor. And again, let Visual Studio Code help you. If you put the cursor over it, it says, hey, you're calling constructor for cat. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. So finally, we can call a method, roar, inside a lion and use properties defined in cat because a lion extends cat and gets everything the cat has. Again, fairly complicated concepts put in sequence here, but expresses object-oriented programming in JavaScript ES6, using classes to define the blueprints, knowing that it will create a future object. And as a review, objects have properties, some type of values. So in this case, this is a property with name, or a method of, and we looked at a special one, constructor. Notice it's a different color, or roar, which again is a different color. Let the colors guide you in Visual Studio Code. So it can have properties or methods. And in this case, this has properties, this has methods, or combinations of both of them, which lion has because it has both a property and methods. And then we can reference those properties based on the blueprints that we provided when we called the constructor which built the object. Again, a lot of complicated terms, but general object-oriented programming using the class keyword and the extends keyword in JavaScript, and following object-oriented programming concepts, looking at is a, has a, or none relationships between one object and another.